Hello learners, welcome to another session of exciting geography. I hope those preparations went well and I hope the prelim really gave you a real boost so that we can get even better marks at the end of the year. Today we're looking at a section which deals with people and their needs. Main focus is on economic geography. All right, and we'll be looking at various aspects. But just to give you an overview of what we will be looking at. We'll be doing past papers, but you also need to look at the major core areas that you need to focus on when studying this section. Now, if you look at it briefly, it's actually, when we look at it, it's your primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary services or activities that we will be focusing on. Like for instance, the primary, you'll be focusing on mining and agriculture, which is your big sections. All right. For secondary, you'll be looking at industries and the four major manufacturing regions, like your PWV, Durban, Pinetown, etc. And then also, you'll be discussing all the factors relating to your tertiary sector, your services. You'll be also looking at foreign trade, things like balance of trade, balance of payment, all right? And then you'll be looking at your quaternary sector, which is your research, IT, etc., that you'll be focusing on. And this, in a nutshell, actually gives you a little brief overview of what your people needs, your economic geography is about. Okay, before I look at the questions, there's also one more thing I need to tell you, and which is very, very important. And that is that sometimes this becomes the quick section. It's right at the end, after a long year of geography curriculum, and then this section appears and we go through it and we make it very content orientated. It's very important. When I'm looking at the questions now, I will show you how important it is to know your concepts and the factors related to your concepts, knowing how to apply your concepts and applying your concepts. And if you do that, this section becomes very, very simple. So past papers in this section is of utmost importance. Because past papers are of utmost importance, let's get started. All right, we're using last year's paper. This year's paper will also have these type of questions which would come out in these sort of formatting, etc. Okay, maybe the marks may be slightly different, but it would come out in this sort of formatting. All right, if we look at question 1 here, it says, choose a description from column B that matches a term in column A. Now, many people spend time just quickly looking at this and looking at the options. And again, your little thing about knowing your concepts and knowing how to apply your concepts come in. All right? For instance, agglomeration. It's like bringing things together. Okay, if I understand, remember these sections sometimes don't have a very high pass rate at the end of your exams because learners don't know the concepts. So bringing things together. And we look at our options here. If I know my concept, obviously agglomeration is the concentration of industries close to one another. All right, so your answer would be C. All right, so for the first one it will be C. All right, industrial decentralization. The action word again, we know it's industrial, that's important. It's not commercial, it's industrial. Decentralization, when things move away. Once we know the concept, then we can very easily find the option that is correct. And when we look at here, we can see industries that move away from the core areas. All right? So we know it's so easy. If we know the concept, we find the answer. Spatial development initiatives, where we actually, it's related to industrial decentralization, etc., where we're having these areas that were not sort of developed before. You understand, apartheid had created a lot of these areas, and now we're creating industrial areas in these areas. Just a brief overview. I got my understanding of my concept, and very easily, we look at it down here, developing industries in previously neglected and undeveloped areas. Obviously, learners, if you don't know the concept, you're going to get many of these things incorrect. All right? Then we go on and we look at free, so let me just put the options again. When industries move away, that will be option E, and spatial development is A. Free trade, that means there's no barriers. You understand? People move, you can free trade across. You hear about the European Union, the African Union, etc. And there's movement of goods more freely than before. Okay, I've got the idea of the concept in my head. I look at free trade, and it's so easy. The barrier, no barrier to goods, imports, etc. And of course, my answer will be B. Okay? Then the last one, trade. You know what's trade, general trade. If you know the concept, that means exchanging goods for money, exchanging good for good, different types of things like that. All right, the word exchange is the action word, and very quickly, exchange of goods and services for a profit. All right, and that's your answer is D. Now you notice, people, learners, the action words. This is not the lotto, where I just take a chance with numbers. This sections here contain marks, and this gives you your boost in your symbols. Just taking a chance with these sections and not knowing the concepts can create huge problems for you. All right, you've looked at the matching one. Let's look at another question. Question 2, which is based on an article. Be very careful here, learners. Many learners, what do? They quickly jump to the questions and try to answer it. In geography, and I can promise you that, most of your resources that is given to you gives you clues to the answers. All right? When it comes to the high order question, in that sort of cases, we take it to a different level where you have to sort of give us analysis, etc. You understand, make predictions and things like that. But generally, a lot of it leads on to answers. We actually call it scaffolding questions, where it leads from one to the next to the level of difficulty. All right? But let's look at this article here, and I'll show you, learners, how much of the answers you get from here and how much of this leads on to the little more difficult questions. All right, let's read this. Bitter coffee. Story of Pedro. The coffee is mainly grown in poor, developing countries. Examiner is giving it to you nicely, like Brazil. Coffee harvest season is over and Pedro is tired. For the past 10 weeks, he and his wife have picked coffee cherries all day starting at 5 a.m. in the morning. All right? It's a harsh world for him. Obviously, he's working long hours. Pedro hears from his cousin in Johannesburg that you can pay a fortune for coffee. All right? And why does he ask the question now, why does he get so little for his coffee beans? That makes him feel really bitter. He's unhappy, and maybe, just maybe, it is time for him to give it up. The examiner gives you a little more to emphasize how little he actually gets. If you look at this clearly, the farmer gets 30%. Of course, Pedro falls into that category. The shipping company gets 70%. The exporters get 90%. They're just in charge of exporting it and sending it. All right. The processing of the coffee, 1 Rand 10 cents. And the cafe gets actually 12 Rand. So from this 15 Rand, Pedro gets 30 cents. So 14 Rand 70 is not with him. Okay? So it's quite a sad story, but it's a reality that's actually happening around the world. Okay? Now, why does Pedro feel so bitter? Okay? Very easily. We've already worked out, if you look at it here, he works starting from 5 a.m. in the morning. He's worked for 10 weeks. It's in the little article down here. He's worked long hours. And he gets paid very little. Now the answer is there already. You need to just read your article, make sense of it, and go through. Okay, let's look at the answer now. We've worked out from the article, we have that. All right? So let's look at it here. He puts in long hours, all right, into farming, but makes a small profit. Can you see it? Exactly from the article. Nothing different. All right? So we found the first answer. The second one, let's go back to the article. Who gets the largest share of the profit from the coffee industry? All right? And if we go back to the article, again, the answer is clearly here. Okay, we can just look quickly at the amounts. And obviously you see that the cafe gets 12 Rand compared to all the others, by far the greatest amount. And the answer is actually given to you in the article. Obviously on this question there was a bit of a problem. Learners from last year will tell you that the graph here was incorrect. It showed, according to the graph, it was a bigger portion here. If that happens in a paper, then we would accept both answers, that and processing, because the graph is incorrect. So both the answers was accepted here. If you look at it, sorry, I just want to go back here. All right, it's coffee, coffee bar, or cafe, coffee bar. All right. It was cafe or coffee bar or processing. Because processing, the graph being incorrect, we have to accept it. And that's a little lesson to you learners. Remember, in an exam situation, you cannot ask your invigilators. But if you think something is not right, you just answer it to the best of your ability. All right? In this case, the option of coffee bar was there, but if it wasn't and the graph was just used on its own, where a big portion was shown for processing, you understand? And if you wrote that down and the graph was incorrect, we would still give you the marks as such. All right? Let's go and look at this one over here. All right? The next question. It states, the coffee is sold to an unprocessed product, as an unprocessed product from Brazil. Explain how this affects Brazil's economic growth. Now, again, the action word comes in here. Unprocessed product. That is the important word here, unprocessed product. And you need to know your terminology and your action words, and sometimes learners, you don't read clearly. This should be highlighted immediately. And then your knowledge of unprocessed product, it's a raw material. It's like just selling your iron ore away. How much do you get for your iron ore? You get very little, okay? But if you take your iron ore, make your iron steel, make your items from it like fridges, etc., you're going to get more value. This has been taught in class. All right? So this is a slightly higher order. It's more like a middle order question itself. So let's look at some of the answers here. It restricts economic growth. Restrict. That's part of your answer because it says coffee sold as an explain how it affects economic growth. All right? So here you need to comment whether it promotes or it actually has a negative impact. Obviously, there was 4 marks for this. So in the other case here is you have to give one of the reasons. Unprocessed goods have a lower value than processed goods, which you know. Lower wages for workers, and lower money. Their standard of living is lower. Their buying power is lower, so you don't have such a domestic market. Limited skills development. Limited skills development in the country doesn't allow the per capita income for the people of the country to grow because people are earning low money. So the quality of life is low. So it would be correct for this, all right, giving whether it's negative or positive, and one of the reasons would be one of the answers there. And that would have given you total for that question itself. Notice how the examiner links globalization, because in the next question itself, it says globalization has resulted in many developed countries buying cheap resources from developing countries. That is a reality. That's what your teachers would have told you also, that developed countries are buying. You know why already. So the examiner gives you a little lead into that. And of course you link it to what you learned. You understand? So that they take the unprocessed goods, they take it to their countries, they process it and sell it back to developing countries or wherever else, making a much larger profit. And it's related to little Pedro's story also, where his stuff is taken out of the country, people sell it at much higher prices, and he gets the smallest amount for it. So, notice once again the concept. What is globalization? All right? And when we looked at it again, the concept of globalization, of course, is going to lead. And if you don't know what's globalization, you're not going to be able to answer the middle higher order questions that actually follow. But you know it, I'm sure, learners. You know about the interconnected social, physical, economic activities between different countries or across different countries. You know the definition, all right? And I'm just going to show it to you here also. I'm putting it in typing so that you don't have to see my ugly writing, all right? So again, similar to that, globalization refers to the interconnection of economic, social, political activities across the world. Please note, learners, some of you now get so worked up that, and I know this feeling here where you go, globalization is the interconnection of physical, social, political activities across the world, etc., or across the countries, and you try to learn it out. Remember, when you look at your memos, on the side you got this written, concept, which means you can put it in any words as long as it means the same thing. If I took globalization and said countries are connected via economic, social activities and political activities, I change it around as long as I mention the interconnectivity of countries related to economic activities, etc., I am safe. So please, when you look at those memos and you're studying, please note that the concept means don't have to learn it word for word. I know certain subjects want that. Here we're saying, put it in your own words, and if it means the same thing, you get the total marks. All right? Suggest 2 ways. That's your next one here. Suggest 2 ways in which globalization can be disadvantageous. Learners, we're finding some problems with this. You don't see the action words. Disadvantageous. All right? That means that it's not the problems that it creates for developing countries. Now, in your stuff, you would have learned things like sweatshops. All right, you would have learned how people are underpaid, they work long hours. You've learned about how much money the country gets because it's just they're using the resources. You get exploitation of resources, exploitation of people. All this comes together. Suggest 2 ways means you must give 2 ways. All right, you don't have to go into massive explanations. The word suggest tells you that, just to give 2 little ideas that can be disadvantageous to developing countries. Okay, I'm going to look at the memo here very quickly. There's many. All right, employment insecurity happens here. All right, let me get my pen working again, Employment insecurity arises when multinational corporations shed their jobs arising from technological advancements. Again, remember, as we spoke about, each time these multinational corporations would belong to developed countries, and they're always looking at speeding up manufacturing, all right? And they want to manufacture much faster. Machinery is helping them, and each time in their home countries, machinery is sort of developed. It's brought to the developing countries, and machines take over people working, and that creates unemployment. Poor working conditions, long hours, encourage sweatshops, resources extracted with no value added. People are exploited as most jobs are lowly paid. So there's various options, but the question asked you for two. This also can turn into a nice paragraph question, where you can actually relate it, but in the paragraph question you'll talk more, not just poor working conditions and long hours encourage sweatshops. You'll explain a little bit more. You understand that developed countries, they put up these factories, you understand, and people are put into one little area, and they have to work for very long hours with low pay. So a little more discussion comes in there. All right? Power of government to reduce the power of government is reduced as they become more dependent on multinational corporations, where those multinational corporations dictate to the government on how things should be, or threaten them that they will leave and they'll take away their investment. All right? So that was relating to two ways. If you gave two ways, explained like this, it is fine. All right? Let's go to the next page. Question 3. This is on an article also, right? And you will find again how much of information you will get from the article that answers your questions. It says, read the newspaper article on food production, all right? Let's read through it. Melons are bursting with chemicals. Examiner has given you already a little idea here. We're stuffing them with chemicals. Already things like genetic modification starts to come to mind. All right, where we're trying to produce bigger stuff, whatever. All right? Watermelons have been bursting in eastern China after farmers gave them too much growth chemicals. There's your problem here. South Africa has heavy trade links with China, therefore the abuse by farmers is of concern to us. Okay? We can see some injustices popping up, learners, like social, all right? Possibly environmental also, because I mean those chemicals are going into the environment, it's going into the soil. Farmers in China are using illegal chemicals, with many also misusing pesticides and fertilizers. Environmental injustice also. All right? The reason is for this is the demand for food, which is a problem being experienced in many countries. All right? Also, fear has also been raised over the wide use of food additives like dyes and sweeteners to increase sales. The need to regulate the food industry is becoming increasingly important because of threats of food insecurity. Terminology, food insecurity. As you're reading this, so what was food insecurity? Yes, when there isn't sufficient amount of food to feed the people of a country in order for them to live a healthy life. All right, that comes to your mind also. The examiner is pointing things to you here. Even a picture is given to you. This is actually a sad sight where the watermelons have burst. They've grown big due to illegal chemicals, and now they're bursting. All right, let's look at the questions. There we go. Can you see it, learners? Already it gave you a description. It led you on. In the article, it stated here, we're making more food because of food insecurity that is happening. Can you see it? Food insecurity. So you've got an idea, not enough food. So sometimes the answer is not really there, but it leads you on to get the correct concept. All right? So obviously, you know, food insecurity, when there isn't sufficient food for people of a country to lead a healthy life. But I want you to look at this, learners. Food insecurity, when the demand for food is higher than the supply, when people do not have enough access to food. Now you know, but I would prefer that you learn the full definitions that they do not, when people do not have access to food in order to live a healthy life. That is your best definition, all right? I'd like you to learn the full definition. Okay, but you notice we can express it in so many different ways. We don't take it a chance and we look at the memo and say, hey, but I've learned this full definition. And this one is a bit on the vague side. All right? I don't need to do it anymore. These are sometimes Marcus memos. You learn the full definition, you put it in. Remember, there are no vague answers, learners. So if we consider that, if the marking process considers that answer vague, you do not get 1 mark, you get a 0. So it's either a 0 or 2 marks for your definitions, etc. So please note that you learn those definitions off fully. Okay? Let's look at the next one. Describe the injustice that is captured in the article. Now you know, you've learned about social, economic, and environmental injustice. Learners, this will appear throughout your paper. All right, and your high order questions, a huge number of them, will be based on these injustices. All right, so you already know it's a social injustice. Why it's a social injustice is the reason, as you looked at your article, it stated clearly, all right, that there were illegal chemicals that people were consuming. They didn't even know about it, but they were consuming it, which makes it a social injustice. It can be an environmental injustice also, because all these chemicals and pesticides, etc., were being pumped into the ground and is damaging the environment. All right, so let's look at our answer here. I'm sure you all are happy, you all don't like my writing. All right, so now at least you can look at the neat writing. All right, people are consuming melons, will not be aware that they have overdosed with growth chemicals. They're not aware. It's a social injustice. We don't have that choice. We weren't aware of it. We could make a decision not to eat it or eat it. All right? But here it is social justice. We don't know about it. Negative impact on their health. If 2 factors were asked for, we would give 2 here. You understand? We'd also look at the mark allocation. 2 times 2 is 4, so that means we give 2. Environmental injustice, I'd like you to give it a bit full. All right, don't just look at the memo. Add a little, because it says describe, okay? And I know this is found in the memo for the markers. You describe it a little more. Environmental injustice, because the chemicals and pesticides are going to the ground and damaging the ecosystem or whatever. You don't have to go into a long detail, but I'd like you to add a little more to justify that. Okay, let's look at it again. It's an environmental injustice because pesticides and chemicals, etc., get into the grounds, damaging the vegetation, the aquatic ecosystem, one example, or the food chains, whatever. Okay, that's an environmental injustice. Okay, I hope you're getting the idea, learners. Don't just leave it like that. All right, this shocked learners. Genetic modification. In many parts of the world, genetically modified crops are seen as a means of increasing food production. Explain the concept, genetic modification. Learners, I know throughout my years, when I've done these shows, I've emphasized, please know your exam guidelines. You must review it. I have learners also when I tell them, you review the guideline and you check if anything is not covered. And genetically modified crops is on that guideline. So you don't just leave it to chance. Sometimes we educators get a bit old and we may slip on a concept. You check your guideline to see if everything is covered. Whether it's written as one concept, or whether the textbook doesn't cover it, but if it's in your exam guideline, you make sure it's covered. All right? So let's look at genetic modification. You would have pictured the change of DNA. This is happening a lot. All right? To make crops more resistant, all right? To make crops sort of have more nutrition, etc. That's your genetic modification. So the action words are DNA, etc. So let's look at the memo. All right? Genetic modification involves the changing the DNA of a plant to make it more resistant, all right, or have more nutritional value. So if you look at it here, it involves a changing of the DNA of the plant. In this instance, it gave 2 marks. Remember, your papers can change. All right, this whole thing may be a concept for 2 marks. We never know. All right, but in this case, it's that 2 times 2 is 4, so you have to give 2 little things, and we split it up here. We emphasized on the DNA of the plant, and we then took it further in terms of that to make sure to make it more resistant, which here would have given you 2 marks, 2 plus 2, which is 4. Or you could have written genetic modification involved changing DNA of the plant to have more nutritional value. Okay? Let's look at this. Next one. Discuss 2 advantages of genetic modification. Again, you notice the trend. If you know what's genetic modification, okay, it's increasing the resistance of the plant. All right, it's also making it more healthier, the nutritional value, if we're getting more of the product. So already it's linked to food insecurity, all right, where you have, and you can already picture the answers even before looking and answering them, all right, where you have enough food to sort the food insecurity problem. You must know it's more resistant, things like floods or droughts, it may survive longer. Frost, it may survive longer, all right, because it's more resistant. But let's look at the memo, all right? The same things. It increases the yields, okay, where we have more of the product available, higher yields. That means from the same piece of land, you get far more of the crop that you had had before genetic modification. Plants are resistant to pests and diseases. Doesn't work for them anymore. You understand those pests and diseases? They can't interfere with the crop still survives it. Greater nutritional value, able to survive drought, all right? Have longer storage life. I know some of us buy this stuff and it's only due in 2 years' time. It's sort of expires in 2 years' time, okay? Some of us don't. At my age, sometimes I may not be able to, if I leave it for 2 years, I'll be gone, okay? And I may not enjoy it, okay? So some things are so long. I know 1 or 2 of these products I bought, and if I kept them over the years, I wasn't even gray and I turned gray. And that product didn't even expire. So that's your genetic modification, all right? Increasing yields, etc. All the positive things about genetic modification. If you gave 2, I'd like you to discuss it a bit more. Remember, it says increases yields, okay? I'd like you to add a few more words there. That means there's more of the crop growing per hectare of land, etc. So more of it growing, increasing. Plants are more resistant to pests and diseases. They can survive the effects of pests and diseases. Just add, it doesn't take you long, few seconds, and add on, so you make sure your explanation is waterproof. It's tight. It doesn't leave any question to it to be vague. All right, but on the other hand, don't answer it as an essay question. Okay? Let's look at 3.4. The increasing demand for food is disturbing development. The increasing demand for food is disturbing development. All right? Again, this word, so easily, what comes to your mind? Food insecurity, eh? That comes to your mind immediately. right? You know about the demand. All that should be pictured in your mind. Give a detailed account as to why many Southern African countries are struggling to meet their need for food demand. Okay, this explanation covers various sections, all right? You can talk from the agriculture, okay, about the different factors affecting agriculture negatively, okay? You can talk about the climatic factors, you can talk about fluvial processes, okay? I'll show you how all these sections can be related in this question. So this is a high order question. All right, it incorporates all, and it's so good to see the relationship between your different sections. You can't learn in little compartments. Let's have a look at this, all right? And I'll show it to you here now. Okay, lack of government support and subsidies. Okay, lack of government support and subsidies, where they can't actually, if you look at this, why they're not producing enough for the demands, because farmers are not encouraged. They can't compete with other companies that are coming from overseas, etc., that are producing at low rates. Poor technology, all right, where we don't have those high machineries or those advanced machineries that we can produce quickly over short periods of time. Drought, floods will destroy crops. Notice that's a climatic condition. Soil infertility, okay, where the soil is infertile and things are not growing, and we only in South Africa, we have below 12% of our land that is arable. So that's a huge problem, and in Southern Africa that's the case. Expensive fertilizers, dealing with money because we're a developing country. Poor infrastructure, all right? I'm going to just go over a few here like this. You've got the memos with you. But poor infrastructure, if you look at this, this is a marker's memo, all right? You are not explaining the points, okay? Give a detailed account. The word poor infrastructure doesn't say much. I could take this further and say poor infrastructure limits the quick movement of goods, okay? Movement of goods. I would say quick movement of goods or efficient movement of goods, okay? Quick or efficient. Efficient movement of goods, all right? If I take poor technology, it's not worth 2 marks. This is the examiner's guideline. I would say poor technology, all right, we don't have the machines, etc., the machines. Example, harvesters to produce at a fast rate. Okay, are you getting this, learners? So don't just look at this and you just write it in your exam. These are the factors: poor technology, soil infertility. You need to explain it a little further. Okay, that is why I put the memo on here to show you that you may not just get marks for this. This is just vague. That a little more explanation is needed, not 2 pages, but a little more to back the point, like I showed you with poor technology. The machinery, we don't have the machinery, etc., the technology to develop the machinery that can produce at a faster rate. Okay, I know I've spoken a lot, and I know you're very thirsty, and you want to go to the kitchen and get a glass of water, so go and get your glass of water and get back as quick as possible for more exciting questions. Welcome back, learners. I hope you're nice and relaxed for the next piece of our geography. All right, so let's not waste a lot of time. I know you're excited to get back to it. The next question that I'm looking at, question 4 down here, learners, these sort of questions, you need to score total. These are your low order questions, all right? It's just basically knowing your concept, You understand? And you got a description and choosing between, which is between two options that's given to you. Let's look at it very quickly down here. All right. Primary, secondary activities refer to the extraction of raw materials. The important word is extraction and raw materials, removing it from the earth. Obviously, if you studied well, it's primary activity. You don't have to waste a lot of time. Farming that is concerned with cultivation for domestic use. Can you see the action words again? It's simple, but if you don't know the action words like domestic use, which is concerned with domestic use with the house, not selling outside, obviously if you're producing for the family, it's subsistence farming. All right. The next one, the balance of trade payment is a financial statement showing the value of a country's transactions with the rest of the world. We found people just jumped in with trade. Because you see, trade, that is not knowing your concepts. Balance of trade is goods and services produced by citizens within the country. Balance of payment is outside the country. So it shows clearly with the rest of the world. So obviously it's payments. Can you see how easily we can misjudge this? All right. Now, activities involve high order services. And what happened here? Learners saw the word services. And immediately when they saw the word services, it's tertiary. They didn't go further, and that is why it's so important to highlight your words, such as research. And immediately, research makes it quaternary. All right, you got that? Okay, this is next one, value of goods and services produced in a country for a year. In a country. Obviously, this would be gross domestic product because it's inside a country. So we have to read. We can't waste marks on these ones. These ones, learners, we should be getting total or near total. But sometimes we just assume quick because we want to get to the other questions and we lose valuable marks. Okay? Let's go on to another question. This brings in your water projects here. All right? Now, this question has got a lot of answers on the diagram itself. Refer to figure 5 based on the Orange River project. The examiner has been nice here, learners. He's told you it's orange. Normally, sometimes we make you tell us which project it is. One of the reasons why this project was developed was to provide the drought-prone Eastern Cape with more water. Examiner has given you lots of information. You know the purpose of it. You know it's going to be advantageous to those people. It's going to supply them water for farming, for domestic use, for industrial activity. All right? Because it's a drought-prone area. You know this area is not receiving as much rainfall as it needs. Remember, when you did it in class, it's stored, it gets into the Kharib Dam. All right? It moves down into those tunnels, okay? It moves in, all right? The Sundays and the Fish River, it comes through there, okay? And of course, it's supplying the water to the Eastern Cape, all right? Through these various canals and tunnels, etc. All right, there's your Sunday catchment, which is getting water, okay? So the general idea is you know what's actually happening, that your water is being moved from one point to the next. You know what's a water scheme, taking of an area of surplus from that basin to the next basin. You can see it's happening here from the Orange River itself. It's being pumped, all right, into other rivers so that it can supply the water. Okay? Now, if you look carefully down here, the question, name one dam that plays an important role in transferring water from the Orange River to the Eastern Cape. We try to give you aids on it. We try to give you sources from where you can get the answer. Okay, if you look at it here, we've got dams already. All right, Gasridge, okay? The Kharib, all right? All this is found in these areas down here. All right, all found down here. And it's written on your stuff or on your source. So you don't need to look very far. And if I look at the answers down here, there we are, the Kharib and the Gasridge Dam. So basically you have to use your source to get the answer. All right? Let's look at the next one. And if you go down here, into which river in the Eastern Cape does the water of the Orange River finally flow? Remember the word, action word, finally flow. All right? Finally flow. All right? That's your action word. So I'm looking it down here. All right, I look at the Sundays River, it's going in. Can you see it? It's not stopping. I look at the Fish River, it's going in. So that's the final flow because it goes into the ocean. Now this can be thought-provoking because we may forget the word finally flow. All right? So it must be the last flow which enters the ocean. So there we have it again. Your Sundays, your fish, right? Those are your answers already set for you there. Sundays and fish. Can you see it? All right. Also in this case, sometimes examiners, guys, they may say one dam that plays an important role in transferring water. And if I looked at these dams, they are transferring water down here. All right? They are transferring water from one point to the next. If we have a dam down here, and let's say it's D dam, and you see no linkage, then, and you give the name of D dam, that's wrong. It must be seen as transferring. So there's a bit of application. We don't just look at the diagram and say, that's my answer. We look, is it transferring? Is the river flowing into the ocean? Is that the final point of transfer before it goes into the ocean, which makes my answer correct? All right, so it's not just answering your questions like that. 5.3, discuss the positive impact that the Orange River project had on the economic development of the Eastern Cape. It makes it seem like it's a high-order question, but learners, this is a simple one. You've done the different projects. And sometimes, let's say, you tell yourself, hey, I only focused on the Tugela River, or the Tuval-Tugela project, or only focused on the Lesotho Highlands project. Your knowledge of that can also help you to answer this question. It provides water, etc., because all water projects are the same. And they gave you about the drought, etc., where you can take all this and work out an answer. I know some learners are a bit on the lazy side. They don't cover all the water projects that they're supposed to, that the guideline says. All right, so basically here you're using all that information. You know, hey, it provides for domestic use. What else would it provide for? Farming activities, because it increases farming activities. It will promote even industrial growth, because this thing is actually going through areas close by to the urban areas. Okay, it'll cut down movement of people, isn't it? Because now people can have more water to farm. So these are all the options. Let's look at the options on this. All right, can you see it? Provides water for irrigation. All right, for farms. Contributes to more yield on the farms because now they have water, crops will grow better. Contributes to the development of industries, which also relies on water. Job creation, because if more industries are coming, what will happen next? There'll be more jobs available in the area. Water has restricted all this. A water project has brought things close by, and now we can actually improve on all this. By having this water flowing from those dams, generation of hydroelectric power, drought relief, because now we've got water. Tourism, people want to come and see these projects. I know the Chugela Valley there's many school excursions, etc., that go in there. Now, many of these things are similar to the other projects. So by chance, and I hope you don't do it, by chance you haven't covered this project, you can use what is put on the source material together with the knowledge of your other sections, and you'll still be able to answer them. All right? Again, discuss it. Remember, tourism is too short. So I could add on and say tourists, right, visit these sites, okay, visit these sites, okay, to look at the magnificent water projects, all right, or magnificent water project. Okay, job creation. There's more job creation because there is development of industries. Okay. Can you see why I like it typed? Because you can see my writing is not the best, eh? But can you see what I'm trying to say, learners? Don't leave it at job creation. Take it a bit further, all right? Because there's more industries, more job opportunities. You understand? Like these ones here are quite full. Provide water for irrigation in farms. That's fine. But don't just leave it if you're talking about. Discuss. Take it a few words. Don't write a whole essay on it. Okay? The Orange River project was also developed to slow down rural-urban migration. Explain the role the Orange River project has in slowing down rural-urban migration. Now already you picture the answer. I think we discussed it already. More water, better farming. Do farmers want to move? If employment opportunities are happening, there's more commercial farming happening, farming is happening on a larger scale, people may want to stay. Because as this is happening, tourism is increasing, people are visiting the area, there's trade happening. It's so many conditions that make people want to stay back now and reduces the project. See, water is readily available, as we spoke about already, readily available, which means farming will improve. Farming land can be extended because you can farm on a larger scale, all right? Farmers will stay in the rural areas because the yields would improve. They'll make their profits. Remember, these sort of questions we can add on. You understand? There's more employment opportunities. There's more investment in the rural areas. Okay, people may want to stay. So these are some of the answers that will give you the marks. Of course, you got this in front of you. I hope this a little lesson has been valuable to you. Please remember the three things. Know your concepts and the factors around your concepts. Know how to apply your concepts and apply your concepts. Do your past papers. Also remember that memo gives you short answers. You need to know the action word. Discuss, explain, means you give more detail. List, name, you just give one word. Please check your action words properly so you know exactly what the question wants. All the best, learners. Remember, between that science and that maths and that accounting, put your geography there also. Don't forget about it. Don't just chill out with your other subjects. Remember, in the end, geography is as important. So study hard, go for that A, and make us proud.